Hello friends, my name's Emile, and welcome back to some more Forza Top Gear laps. Today we're taking a look at some D-Class cars, and we are kicking things off with the 1994 Nissen 300ZX Twin Turbo, 276 horsepower, 283 foot-pound torque, 3,351 pounds of weight. As I mentioned while I'm doing these sort of class-based episodes, I will mention the PI. This car is a D400, the highest PI car here today, indeed the highest D-Class car in the game from stock. So yeah. The 300ZX, a car I quite like, the old Z32, probably my favourite of the Z cars, I guess. You can do some pretty interesting things to the Z32. It has a good collection of mighty wings you can stick on this thing, and I do recommend them because they're just ginormous, and also has a pretty cool racing car counterpart. Anyways, as far as the 300ZX is concerned, how does it drive? It's decent. You can feel the weight. The Z32 is known for being a little bit of a heavyweight when it comes to these Japanese sports cars, along with the Mitsubishi GTO, and yeah, you can feel the weight in this thing. 3,351 pounds actually does make this the second heaviest car here today, non-surprisingly. But you know, if you can strip some of the weight out and so on, the ZX does make for a pretty good race car. You can do quite a bit with it, and it's highly customizable, so yeah, give it a go if you haven't already, if you want something a little bit different to your usual Skyline affair. Next up, we have the 2011 Alfa Romeo Giulietta QV, 231 horsepower, 251 foot-pound of torque, 2,910 pounds of weight, D-Class 391 in PI. I figured I'd bring the Giulietta on here because I wanted a hot hatch, and I wanted a little bit of a different hot hatch from the usual affair. And the Alfa Giulietta is a car which isn't usually thought of when you think of hot hatches. Indeed, it is a pretty mild hatch, to be fair. It's not really particularly hot, 230 horsepower. You know, back in the day, that had been great, but, you know, the 2006 Astra has more power than this, and that was in 2006, and yeah. Nevertheless, though, I do quite like the Giulietta. It's a pretty good looking car, and it's going to be a touring car soon as well, which is pretty awesome. As far as it drives, it is, once again, another decent car to drive. It is very solid. There is a fair bit of understeer when you really push it, which is a bit of an issue. It's a kind of easy hot hatch to control, certainly. It's not the best handling. There's much better handling ones. There's much better handling ones with more power than this, but as far as D-Class goes, there's not really much options as far as this class goes, so yeah, if you want something a little bit different to drive, you know, front-wheel drive, a bit of a mild hatch, then yeah, take a look at the Giulietta. Next up, we have the 1990 Renault Alpine Lamont, 197 horsepower, 214 foot-pound of torque, 2,624 pounds of weight, D383 in PI. The Alpine, out of all the cars here today, this is probably the best looking of all of them. I do really like the way the Renault Alpine looks. It sort of looks like a DeLorean with a wide body, and it's great. Yeah, the Alpine Le Mans, pretty interesting car. It is, as near as makes no difference, rear-engined. They say it's mid-engined. It basically is rear-engined. Rear-engined, rear-wheel drive, basically, kind of like a Porsche 911. Admittedly, statistically, it's nowhere near as impressive as most 911s, but there you go. As far as the Alpine is to drive, it's actually pretty darn good. I've driven this a few times for various for Horizon 3 and for this. I like it. You don't really want to put much more power into it, I will say that much. There's engine sorts available for this. In Horizon 3, there was a GTR engine you could stick in this. Don't know if you can do that now. I wouldn't recommend doing that. There's also one other issue with the Alpine, like you sort of saw through there. The front end is quite light. The front end does have a tendency to lift a bit. It's nowhere near as bad as that CJ5 from last time. God, that thing was awful from front end lift. But yeah, it does have a bit of front end lift, but it's nowhere near as bad as that, and it's nowhere near as bad as some 911s. So yeah, once again, it's something a little bit different if you want to try something like that. Next up, I had to get a muscle car in here, and the one I decided on was the 1971 Plymouth GTX 426 Hemi. What a name. 425 horsepower, 490 foot-pound of torque, 3,670 pounds of weight. It is the most powerful car here today. It's by far the most torquey car here today, and it is unsurprisingly, the heaviest. It's also probably the biggest in terms of surface area. The GTX is humongous. It is a big old boat, this one. Really is. GTX, pretty interesting car. I don't think we've had this go around the track before in any game. I've driven the Cuda a few times, but never the GTX, which is a bit of a shame because the GTX is actually the slightly statistically better of the two. I believe this one is actually slightly lighter than that is. As far as the GTX goes, it's actually pretty good for a muscle car. £3,670 sounds like a lot, but in terms of muscle cars, it's actually not that much. It's quite light. It's no Caterham by any stretch of the imagination. I believe like some of the lightest muscle cars, stuff like the Mustangs, I believe, are quite light. But yeah, it is pretty good. It does handle like a muscle car. It's a big old bruiser. You've got understeer, you've got oversteer if you push it. It's wibbly, it's wobbly, it's got a terrible gearbox, but you know, muscle cars don't really come much better than the GTX, to be fair. Next up, we've got the 1995 Mitsubishi Eclipse GSX, 210 horsepower, 214 foot-pound of torque, 3,199 pounds of weight. This car is D356, the GTX was D369, I don't know if I mentioned that. The Mitsubishi Eclipse, a car which I've never really been a huge fan of. A lot of people like the Eclipse, a lot of people like this model Eclipse. I personally don't see it, but you know, some people like it. It is the happiest looking car here. There's no question about that. It has a massive grin on its face, but not really much of a looker, in my opinion. As far as Eclipses go, I prefer the sort of last gen Eclipses. I think they look a lot better than this one does. Admittedly, though, this one does have four-wheel drive, which is a good thing. As far as the Eclipse goes, it's honestly not hugely interesting. It's a bit nondescript. It's not bad by any stretch of the imagination, it just hasn't really got anything going for it. It's just a slightly underpowered front-wheel drive car. I'm sure if you chuck power at this thing, it is pretty good. I can imagine it's quite quick because it's really small, but it doesn't really do much for me. An interesting thing to note with the Eclipse is that the Eagle Talon, which is basically the same car as this, is a full 20 psi lower and only weighs 1 pound more. Other than that, they have exactly the same stats, so I'd probably say go for the Talon if you're going to build either of those up. Next up, we have the 1990 Subaru Legacy RS, 217 horsepower, 199 foot-pound of torque, 2,990 pounds of weight, sporting the classic rally livery that it has to, of course. Again, another car which I don't recall if this has ever gone around the track before. I don't think it has. Another four-wheel drive car, similar to the Eclipse. In fact, as far as statistics go, they are pretty similar. The Eclipse is slightly more torquey, however this is slightly lighter and has slightly more power, which is rather interesting. Of course, there's also 5 years gap, and, well, you can kind of feel it. It is a little bit wobbly on the suspension. This car is D327 in PI, which actually I believe still makes it a higher PI than that Eagle Talon, which I mentioned, so yeah, that's still a car which confuses me. Anyways, yeah, as far as the Subaru goes to drive, honestly, it is a bit on the understeery side. Not really sure for that. It has got full-time all-wheel drive. It hasn't got that much power, and it doesn't weigh much, so I can't really figure out for the life of me why it understeers, but it does. You know, out of the Legacy and the Eclipse, I would still probably go with the Legacy, just because there's a bit more PI to play with. You could probably do a fair bit more with this, but it's not a bad car. Again, it's just not particularly amazing. Next up, we have an amazing car. We have the 1986 Dodge Shelby Omni GLHS, 175 horsepower, 175 foot-pound of torque, 2,540 pounds of weight. This is the least torquey vehicle here today, surprisingly enough. The PI is a D310, so yeah, we're really creeping into the slower D-Class cars now. The mighty Dodge Omni. It sounds really weird, but when I heard this car was coming back, I was overcome with joy. I have no idea why. But I love it. I love the Dodge Omni, just because it's such a silly car. Particularly the Shelby one. It's like the Speedo has extra numbers so the speedo can wind over itself. It's crazy Shelby at his finest. As far as driving goes, it's solid. It has got a sucky differential. We do find this with front-wheel drive cars, and indeed some rear-wheel drive cars actually. The diff is quite open, and as you see it go around corners, you will see a lot of tyre smoke because one tyre is catching fire. There you go. It is quite a amusing sight to behold when it happens. Not particularly good when you're driving it because that just basically means understeer. Yeah, it's not quick, it's not pretty, it's not the best driving car in the world, but it is a bit of a laugh, and actually, as I've figured out, you know, when you build these things up, they can make pretty decent race cars. And finally today, we have the lowest PI D-Class car in the game, the 1973 BMW 2002 Turbo, 168 horsepower, 181 foot-pound torque, 2,381 pounds of weight. It is the least powerful car here today, and the least torquey. The PI is D301, so yeah, right at the bottom of a D-Class. The 2002 Turbo. I've explained this car before, it's a weird one. I've never really been a huge fan of it, but as of recent it is starting to grow on me. I found the lovely Alpine paint job, which I picked for Reach to Peak a while ago as well, which I was quite happy with because I love this sort of blue and seafoam colour combination on the stripes and everything. It looks pretty cool. Go download it if you're going to drive around in the 2002 Turbo. If you are going to drive around the 2002 Turbo, expect to have fun, because this is a rather fun car to drive. Not fun in the 914 sense, you don't have complete faith in this, it's quite floaty, suspension-wise, but it is good, you know, it grips. But above all else, it's just a fun car to drive. You know, I kind of like these older cars with the leany suspension. It feels like you're around corners a million miles an hour faster than you actually are. You can sort of see almost the back wheel lifting up there. Yeah, it's a fun little car to chuck around. Could it be a serious race car? Probably, but I kind of like it, and it's non-serious, guys. Anyways, on to the leaderboard, and the Nissen 300ZX Twin Turbo, unsurprisingly, is the fastest car today, going 6th place with 127.552. Interestingly enough, it is 10th of a second off of the Megane RS 250, interestingly enough. In 7th, we've got the Alfa Romeo Giulietta QV, which goes into 7th with a 128.450, which is very slightly quicker than the Acura Integra that we benchmarked a couple of weeks ago. The Renault Alpine Lamont goes into 9th with a 129.407, and hot on its heels in 10th is the Plymouth GTX 426 Hemi with a 129.408. I'm not joking, those cars were in 1,000th of a second of each other. Completely different within 1,000th of a second. It's pretty incredible. And both of those cars are slightly quicker than the RX-7 FC that we've had go round. The Mitsubishi Eclipse GSX goes into 12th with 130.988, and despite having a slightly more power and slightly less weight, the Subaru Legacy is slower, going into 13th with 132.279. The BMW 2002 Turbo goes into 15th with 132.403, losing out slightly to the Lancia Fulvia Rally, which we had go around last time, which is an E-Class car, although again, there's like one PI in it, so oops. And finally, unfortunately for me, the slowest car today, going to 16th, is the Dodge Shelby Omni GLHS with a 133.616. It is quicker than the Death Machine Jeep CJ5 Renegade, but yeah, it's just the differential that kills that car. Anyways, thank you all very much for watching this edition of Forza Top Gear Laps. Do hope you've enjoyed. If you have any themes or cars you'd like to request for the series, you can do so in the comments section. Next time, we are going to be taking a look at C-Class cars, so join me for that. Thank you all very much for watching, and until next time, a farewell.